Okay, cool. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever. It's morning for me. I've been surviving on a couple of Red Bulls since the past few hours, and it's been amazing. I'm loving each and every talk. So this talk is about fuzzing. If you like fuzzing and if you like REST APIs, the next 20 minutes might be something very interesting for you. First of all, heads up, nobody is responsible for whatever I speak. So if there's something wrong that I speak, then yeah, it's me. You should be blaming. This is our team. It's me, Abhijeth. I work as an application security consultant for some bank. I like training. I like spreading awareness. I work as a guest lecturer at a university here. Got lucky with finding some bugs in Google, Yahoo, Facebook, and one among top 5 bug hunters. And my team members, Lalit and Srini. Lalit is our code developer. He's Lord of Fazzapi. So most of the code that's written in for Fazzapi has been written by Lalit. So I'll talk more about why we chose Ruby on Rails to write Fazzapi and how Fazzapi basically works. And that's our Twitter handle. Looks like we need some love. Happy to listen to you. So this is a slide I got from Jason Haddock's slide earlier today. And if you remember, if you saw his presentation, he did not have enough time to talk about API testing. And I thought, well, because my talk is about REST APIs and I'm going to talk about fuzzing, maybe it actually makes sense for me to talk about API testing. So thanks, Jason. Thanks for allowing me to steal your slide. I'm going to talk about why API fuzzing is really cool and why it still is an unexplored area. Why and what are the different ways or what are the different techniques that I used, and how me and Lalit basically decided that we would come up with a tool that will help us to fuzz REST APIs. Uh, this is a line that I wanted to mention. In spite of a widespread use of REST API across the globe by different organizations, you still see top organizations like Facebook, Google, and Microsoft, etc., making mistakes and developers making mistakes while writing REST APIs. In fact, there's this dude called Anand Prakash who keeps finding vulns on Facebook, and most of his vulns are like P1s, and all of his vulns, most of his ones he gets like paid a lot of bounty. So I thought I'd first talk about few vulnerabilities. Like this is one of my favorite vulnerabilities where you have APIs which talk about upload/JSON, and then when you're trying to upload a file, in the response, basically it says 201 created, and it'll basically give you a reference to an object. And most of the times what happens is, if there is a functionality in the application where you're allowed to upload a file, you basically upload a file and there's a reference which gets generated to your document, and you basically go to the application and delete the file, but the reference which gets generated, the API reference which gets generated to your document is still live. And in spite of you deleting the file from the application, or even if you delete your entire account from application, I've seen cases where you would still have access to the files which get uploaded by you or which get uploaded by, say, your team member. If it's an HR application, imagine there's a ex-employee who uploads document but still has access to his team members' documents, etc., something like that. This is another example. I think this was one of my favorite ones, which basically led to the idea of developing a tool like Fazzapi. I think this was found by Akhil Rainey. He found this on Twitter, where basically he uses a API. He captures it using a REST client. He sends a message to someone, and I guess he deletes the direct message. And in spite of deleting the direct message, he uses the previously captured REST API, and then he would simply forward the request, and he would still be able to get access to the direct message which got previously deleted, which means clearly there is some access control violation here. And this is another vulnerability which Peter talked about a couple of hours ago, a vulnerability where you would see unwanted information being displayed in the JSON response, but you would not be seeing the same response being reflected on the HTML page. If you remember, most of the examples that Peter has given are really amazing, because I personally remember finding at least 10 to 15 vulnerabilities in a span of 2 months on a couple of large applications, just similar to those. And this is a common mistake that most developers do. What they do is they do reveal a lot of information in JSON response, which is not being reflected on the application, but they forget to remove it from the JSON response, which means just by using a simple burp repeater, you can get access to unwanted information, which is not being reflected on the web application. And it's not just web application. This is an example for a mobile application. Because mobile applications can also use web APIs, I thought I would show you this example. This is a test application written by Srini. It's a test iOS application, which we would probably be releasing during Black Hat. So I'll also give a demo later in the talk about this particular vulnerability. Yeah, so I'm sure vulnerabilities like this sound really interesting. There are several other vulnerabilities with respect to REST APIs. Like, for example, sometimes you see user IDs being used in the URL in the form of simple numbers. Like, for example, if my user number is 10, there would be a REST API which says API/v2/ID/1 and ID/10. And if you just increment the number from 10 to 11, and you would sometimes be able to access information of another user, or I've seen cases where I was able to access someone else's inbox and read their private messages. I was able to, you would see most of the insecure direct object references in such scenarios where you just increment a simple number and you would get access to someone else's files. So vulnerabilities like this are really interesting, and most of these vulnerabilities are logical. So it really makes it really difficult for us to automate such attacks. Like, for example, if you want to automate an attack like, say, cross-site scripting, then based on the response that you get, based on the HTML response that you get, maybe you could say, okay, because the script that I'm injecting in the request is being reflected in the response, there is a slight chance that there is a cross-site scripting. So I just have to check the response and then go back and then do a manual verification and see that there's a cross-site scripting. But for vulnerabilities like this, where most of these vulnerabilities are logical, it is a bit difficult for us to automate such attacks. But we thought maybe we could automate such attacks. And we decided, why do you want to automate? Because this was one question Lalit was asking me every single day. Every time I talked to him, he was like, why do you want to automate? People are already happy testing for such vulnerabilities manually. Then I'm like, well, Lalit, you know what? People don't have time, especially developers, with the whole agile, and I'm quoting the word agile here, with the whole agile thingy going on in the industry, people actually don't have time to test for vulnerabilities. And in spite of large/big organizations saying their applications are really secure because they have XYZ firewalls, because they have XYZ controls in place, developers are still making mistakes with respect to developing secure APIs. So we thought it definitely makes sense to automate at least few of these attacks. And that's when we decided to develop Fuzzappy. So Fuzzappy is an open source REST API fuzzer, which we basically released 7 months ago in OWASP AppSec USA. It basically will help you to test for vulnerabilities while you're testing your own code. It not just helps developers, but it also helps penetration testers. Like if you are new to penetration testing, and if you still don't know a few attack vectors while testing REST APIs, you could probably rely on Fuzzappy. And then when Fuzzappy says, hey, this REST API is vulnerable to, this request is vulnerable to, say, insecure direct object reference, then you can probably go back and do a manual verification and see if that request is actually vulnerable to an insecure object reference or not. It does cover a few top attacks. Again, I use the word top there, but I really don't want to say top. I would say it covers few common attacks on REST APIs, like, for example, access control violation or API rate limiting or insecure direct object reference. But one specific vulnerability that I and Lalit and most of our team are really proud of is like privilege escalation. Like sometimes Fuzzappy has helped us to identify privilege escalation in few of the applications, which I'll probably be talking about in a couple of minutes. And yeah, a lot of people ask us why we build this tool on Ruby on Rails. Well, the answer is very simple. Out of me, Srini, and Lalit is the best developer in our team, and he writes code in Ruby on Rails. So it was an easy call for us. We were like, hey, Lalit, do you want to use Ruby on Rails? And then he was like, yes, let's use Ruby on Rails because it just makes my life easier. And then yeah, we just built it on Ruby on Rails. So this is another question that people ask us. They're like, so you think pen testing can be automated? Well, absolutely not. I'm a firm believer of the fact that pen testing can never be automated. Pen testing is one such domain which cannot be replaced by robots or tools. But there is definitely a part of the stuff that we do which can be automated. And this was a poll that I did some time back. And yeah, like most people said, approximately 25 to 30% of the attacks that they do can be automated. Some cool stuff about Fuzzapi. These are the common vulnerabilities that Fuzzapi can find. Everybody talks about cool stuff, but there is also not so cool stuff about Fuzzapi, and that's dependencies. Unfortunately, if you want to run Fuzzapi on your laptop, you need to make sure that you have all the dependencies on your laptop. You need to make sure you're running the latest version of Ruby. If you get errors, then you would have to probably go to Stack Overflow and then make sure you're reading the right thread and probably troubleshoot the error that you're getting and then try to make sure that Fuzzapi is running. Just to make things easier, we also have a Dockerized version of Fuzzapi. So just in case you have Docker on your computer, you can run Fuzzapi on your computer. Yeah, so I think it's time for demos. I hope my computer is running. So if you want to download Fuzzapi, all you have to do is just go to Google and type Fuzzapi. Luckily, our SEO is working fine now, so it'll take you to our Fuzzapi's GitHub page. And we do have step-by-step process on how you can install and set up Fuzzapi. Pretty straightforward. You open your terminal. I already have Fuzzapi running. On the first terminal, I basically say, I basically go to this path. I say bundle space install, rake db migrate. I just have to type Rails space s, which basically starts my Rails server on this terminal. And on my second terminal, I have to start my Redis server. And on my third terminal, I have to start Sidekick. And I'll probably talk about Sidekick as I show you the tool. Once you turn on your Rails server, let me just minimize this and take this thumbnail. Yes. You just have to go to, let me open an incognito mode, say localhost 3000. And this is how the application would look like. You can click on sign up. Trust me, we are not going to spam you because this doesn't work. It's just on your local computer. Password is password, password is password. No, that's a really good password. Wow, I'm proud of you. But okay, cool. I didn't know that there was this check. Okay. So this is what the tool would look like. It's asking you basically for a URL. You just have to specify which method it is, and then you would have to give raw headers, and then you would have to specify the parameters. So for testing purposes, I do have Mutility running on my computer. Shout out to Mutility guys. Thanks for having this application, and this application really helps us to give demos. I'm just going to run it on my computer. Please bear with me. Looks like my computer is super fast. So, okay, go to web services, REST, SQL injection. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. When I first started penetration testing like 5 to 6 years ago, and people started using REST APIs, I always thought REST APIs were secure against SQL injection until I personally found an SQL injection by myself, and I was like, shit. Oh, okay, cool. So REST APIs are actually vulnerable to SQL injection, and I always thought they were not vulnerable. So I was actually really dumb. But yeah, I'll also talk about a few resources that you need to know if you want to know more about REST API penetration testing. I'm gonna go to this user. As you can see, if I click on this, it's basically gonna give me the required information with respect to a user called as Adrian. Since this is a get method, I'm simply going to copy this URL and I'm simply going to paste it here. As you can see the drop down, I've done a test run before just to make sure the demo gods are in my favor. I'm just going to click on scan. As you can see, once I click on scan, Fuzzapi is basically going to fuzz each and every parameter and each and every field in the URI. it might take around 4 to 5 minutes for the scan to get completed. Just for the benefit of the viewers, I have already run the scan. And if you want to see all the scans that you have run, you can just click on scans. And yeah, these were the different scans that I've run, and it looks like most of my scans have been successful. As you can see, there is a status which says completed processing. For this specific API, it says there are 38 vulnerabilities, but yeah, it does scanning this for a specific API in DBWS actually takes a bit of time. So I'm just gonna open this. Oops. Yeah, if you click on that, it'll basically take you to the URL. But if you click on scans slash the scans scan ID, it's gonna give you some low-hanging fruits. It's gonna tell you that, yeah, this is vulnerable to information disclosure through this header. And then it also says this has possible SQL injection. So this is when FuzzAPI is telling you that there might be an SQL injection and you would have to do a false positive analysis. And it also says there's a possible insecure direct object reference. Now, there are multiple checks we have for insecure direct object reference. For example, one of the checks we have, especially in this particular case, okay, one of the checks that we have is we do increment of numbers, like something that you do in a burp intruder. It is automatically done in FuzzAPI. The second thing that we do is, if you know there's a burp extension called as burp authorized, after developing FuzzAPI, we realized that there's actually a burp extension called authorized, which would basically help you to find privilege escalation and access control violations. So most of those checks can also be done by possible IDOR check that we have in place. Also, if, for example, your response contains a reference link to a PDF document or .document or .txt file or .jpeg file, then FuzzAPI will trigger it as possible IDOR. Then you would have to do a manual verification. And then you would have to see if the page is actually vulnerable to insecure direct object reference or not. Now, let me just quickly go to this URL. As it says, it's vulnerable to SQL injection, and it says it's because of a simple single quote. I'm just going to put a single quote, and the moment I do that, I think it should throw me an error. In fact, when you start running a scan, you can also go to your Sidekick, and you can see that Sidekick actually displays the errors that are found in the response. So Sidekick thinks it's vulnerable to SQL injection because this is what it has seen in the response. As you can see on this web page, I give a single quote, and it says you have an error in your SQL syntax, and that's why FuzzAPI thinks that this is vulnerable to SQL injection. FuzzAPI also mentions that this is vulnerable to insecure direct object reference. That's because we do a check with respect to as soon as it sees a parameter called ID or username or name, FuzzAPI does a check with the value admin. And as you can see, this is because now I understand how FuzzAPI works. I'm just going to simply say username is equal to admin. And if I'm not wrong, this should basically give me the details of an administrator. There you go. It says username admin, and it basically gives me the username details of an administrator. So this is how FuzzAPI works. But then the sad part about FuzzAPI is this is just a fuzzer. It is not a pen testing robot. It's not an automated tool. It's not smart. It is dumb. It's just a fuzzer which is basically running a bunch of checks. So at the end of the day, it needs a human to verify if the vulnerabilities are valid or not. So there has to be a developer or a penetration tester who has to run a scan, look at the report, and validate if the vulnerabilities are valid or not. So that is unfortunately the sad part, but I guess this is something you have with most of the tools or most of the fuzzers in the market. I had the slides just to make sure that if demo doesn't work, I'll just show you the screenshots, but because demo worked, I can skip the slides. And yeah, so the moral of the story is automation is not bad. I think you can automate a bunch of things, especially I'm sure from the past few hours, you would have seen a lot of talks about reconnaissance, and you would have seen a bunch of tools, a bunch of scripts, which would basically help you to find various subdomains or various hosts that you would never have thought that would be there on the internet. So automation is not bad. So if you have an idea, if you see something being repetitive, something a similar vulnerability that you're finding in multiple applications, I would definitely recommend you to give it a shot and try automating, because it might not just help you, but it might help the entire community. Uh, uh, and again, there are some other talks about penetration testing, pen testing web services, like this talk, pen testing RESTful web services, on SlideShare. I think when you go to Google and type pen testing RESTful services, this is the first presentation that comes up. I think it's a really good presentation. I would definitely recommend everyone to go through it if you want to know more about REST API penetration testing. Unfortunately, there are not many REST API vulnerable applications, especially when we are talking about mobile applications which use web APIs. But one of my friends, Srini, is working on this one such application. I'm sure he'll release it as soon as possible, finger crossed. Other than that, after writing for Zapier, after a video went on YouTube, we realized that there were a few other tools which did similar job. One of them being Syntribos. So I would definitely recommend for you to have a look. I did have a play around with it a couple of months ago, and yeah, it works well. And on June 19th, I think Zap also started working on scanning APIs. So if Zap is nothing but ZAttack proxy, again, if you're into open source tools, Zap is a fantastic tool that you can integrate into your build pipeline, and it does some bunch of automated checks for you. Definitely would recommend to use Zap in your build pipeline to catch some low-hanging fruits. This is our API Fuzzer gem. Oh, I forgot to mention. So Fuzzappy is the app, and Fuzzappy basically used API Fuzzer gem. And if you want to make modifications to the code, if you want to write your own custom checks, I would definitely suggest you to go see API Fuzzer, because only if you see the gem, this gem is being utilized by Fuzzappy, and Fuzzappy works based on the checks that we have written in for API Fuzzer. And those are our Twitter handles. For concerns, feedback, or rants, feel free to contact us. We will try to respond as soon as possible. Again, I love the word as soon as possible, but yeah, definitely try to respond as soon as possible. Thanks to these guys for making internet secure again. Like 5 years ago, when I was reading about Buckrout, I was reading about the stories on how Casey started Buckrout. I was really curious to see where the industry would go, but the amount of change that these guys have brought into many bug bounty researchers and a lot of organizations' lives is really amazing. So kudos to all of you. Thanks for making this internet secure again. And yeah, personal shout out to Jeff Carricker. He's a really nice guy. He keeps pushing me and he makes me try harder. So kudos to him. And yes, thanks a lot, Sam, Casey, and Jason, for organizing this conference. I think it's a great initiative, and I definitely see a lot of people getting benefited out of it. I'm sure a lot of them are not going to sleep tonight and just start hunting for vulnerabilities. So thanks to you guys.
Thank you, man. This is a great talk.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, I think I actually am going to sleep tonight because running a conference is kind of stressful. but yeah.
Yeah, you need some sleep for sure. Yeah.
Cool. I had a question, and I think we have some other ones too. So does the tool parse the request and response structure of the API by itself, or do you have to define that individually with basically checking the box for what method it uses and stuff like that?
Yeah, unfortunately, at this point, you have to probably copy it from Burp Suite and paste it in the tool.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. But our dream is probably to have a bunch of requests in an Excel file and just upload the CSV, and then we want the tool to understand the CSV and run scans on multiple requests simultaneously. That's the dream. Working on it since like 3 weeks, but unable to make it work. Let's see how it goes.
Well, it's definitely not a thing that's standard, right? Like every API has a different way to deal with things, especially when a new framework comes out that
Yeah.
does things a little bit differently. So I mean, it's almost like I miss the structured day, like the more structured days of WSDLs and XML, but I don't
Yeah.
really. But like that was easier to define. So yeah.
Yeah. Definitely easier to define. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, let's see here. Let me pull up the Q&A panel. Arun asked if he said that there was a problem with the Docker image at one point. Is it in a working state right now, getting the Docker images up?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's working fine. Yeah. If someone
cool,
has an issue, I'm happy for them to raise an issue.
cool,
Try to solve it.
cool. All right, yeah, that was the only one on here. So cool. Well, we'll take a small break until our next presenter. And thank you so much for the talk. I really appreciate it. It was awesome.
Thanks a lot. Have a
Mhm.
nice day, everyone.